What's a small bombshell your therapist dropped during a session that completely shifted your perspective? I described what another person must have been thinking or feeling when they did X. My therapist described an alternative version of what they may have been thinking or feeling, which was immediately completely plausible and was a much kinder interpretation than mine. It was then that I realized my interpretation of reality could potentially be really flawed and cause me unnecessary strife. It made me realize that I should be much slower to judge actions and words, and that especially in the case of people whom I had reason to trust, I should actually seek clarification before I jump to emotional conclusions. Right? Never attribute to malice what can just as easily be attributed to ignorance, yes? It gets you through life a lot more happily. Story 2. When discussing why I felt like I couldn't leave my cruel relationship, I said that it wasn't some pattern of behavior for me and that I'd never found myself in a situation like this before. She told me that this relationship mimicked the cycle of cruelty I had been dealing with since I was a child with my mother. The cruelty, the stonewalling, the silent treatment blaming me for her behavior, discarding or disowning me, the reemergence with no accountability, and the denial of any wrongdoing over and over for decades. It was exactly the same. I'd never found myself in this situation romantically out of pure luck. I'd just never had any cruel partners before. But my response to cruelty was to revert almost exactly the way I did as a child and young adult with my mother. Make myself small, prioritize a relationship over my well-being, have no boundaries, forgive everything, walk on eggshells, do everything I can, including therapy, to fix myself and figure out how to solve the situation all on my own. Revert into myself, build walls emotionally, disassociate. It hit me like a bag of bricks. Story 3. The night my dad passed away, we were at his hospital bedside. I'd banned my cruel boyfriend at the time from coming as I didn't want him there and my family didn't like him. He kept ringing my mom as I switched my phone off. I beat myself up for years and said to my therapist that the last thing my dad heard was me arguing with my ex. My therapist said, "How about your dad heard you standing up to him and telling him no?" I'm so grateful she said this, and I tell her that often as it completely shifted that shame. I totally believe that my dad would have been so proud of me for telling my ex no. Story 4. That I was deserving of the same kindness I showed other humans and animals. He asked what I liked most about myself. After a long pause, I said I was kind. He asked for examples. I told him about cooking for ill friends, staying sober purely to trip-sit some crazy parties, being vegan solely for ethical reasons, working with disabled and sometimes violent kids for minimum wage, picking up stranded friends, volunteering for animal charities, and being the house that everyone came to when they had a problem. He nodded thoughtfully, then asked, "But are you kind to yourself?" Just the idea that I was worthy of my own kindness completely blew my depressed little brain. Story 5. I've always had a rough time remembering things, being on time and losing focus, etc. At my request, my GP sent me to a psychologist for an ADHD assessment when I was 37 years old. I've been reading up on it and it sounded just like me, but I also had imposter syndrome badly, and as soon as the appointment was made, I started doubting myself. I get to my first appointment an hour early with all my paperwork ready to go. I just knew he was going to say I was fine and send me on my way just based on that. But no, not only did I have the wrong day, it was the wrong month. The second session, he sat me down and said, "The fact that you have gone this long without a diagnosis or any help is frankly astonishing. I have to ask, with no disrespect, how have you held down a job?" Everything changed after that. Hearing confirmation that something was off and it wasn't me just being lazy totally shifted my perspective. I got on medication. I started researching how to help myself that would work with how I perceived life. It was honestly life-changing in the best way. I still have my moments, but now that I understand why I do things the way that I do, I can counter them or even prevent them. Story 6. "So what?" said to me after I had spilled something. This was around 1983, long before it was okay to seek therapy and insurance didn't cover it. I was around 22, 23 years old. I immediately felt dismissed, hurt, and confused, and I said, what?" He said again, "So what?" I sat dumbfounded and didn't say a word. He then smiled and said in a much softer tone, "So what are you going to do about it?" Wow, it turned my world upside down. From that moment on, all my life, when I'm unhappy with myself or a situation, I ask myself, what are you going to do about it? This has led to a lot of growth in all areas of my life. Not gonna lie, I still have my struggles, but instead of passively feeling I can't win and life happens to or at me, I actively work towards solutions, resolutions, and growth. It made me accountable for my words, my thoughts, and my actions. Also, from a non-therapist, acknowledge the fear and know you can work through it. It was in reference to a high-risk sport, but that phrase has also helped me when my GAD tries to strangle me. Story 7. Childhood neglect. Whoa, no, I didn't mean to sound that dramatic. It was not like that. There was no food, not in the cabinets, but she always got us fries or spaghetti for dinner. So, not a balanced meal. That's neglect. If you put it like that. She didn't take you to school. We went, but we skipped often. Educational neglect. Makes sense. She went to bed all afternoon and you were not allowed to wake her up. Emotional neglect. You had to take care of her when she was intoxicated. Parentification, which means you took care of her when she was supposed to take care of you. Neglect isn't just about how clean the house is, what shoes you have, or personal hygiene. Neglect has many faces. Story 8. I'm someone who beats themselves up all the time for having feelings, partially due to the eldest child voodoo, but also a cruel father who would punish me for things that weren't my fault, and past exes who made me feel like my feelings were inconvenient or annoying to them. It's wired me to stay silent when upset and not ask for things I need from people because if I do, I'm afraid I might hurt their feelings and they wouldn't choose me. When approaching hard conversations or issues with others, I am so absorbed in worrying about them that I second guess if it's okay to feel what I feel and if it's fair to even be upset. So I struggle with trying to set boundaries for myself. When talking with my therapist about whether it's fair to ask for this or that from someone and whether or not something is a big enough deal to bring up, he looks at me and says, "It doesn't matter what they think, it's a big deal to you, that's enough." Made me sob, haha. Story 9. My husband and I got married young, so we wanted to make sure we had our ducks in a row. One of the things our therapist told us was this, and I've shared it with all soon-to-be married folks. Pretend you are in a room, you are at one end and your partner is on the other. Fill this room with every person you've ever known, family members, friends, bullies, and strangers. Now try to find each other through that. As you see these ghosts' faces come up in front of you both, remember that how you see and hear your partner is clouded with them. Past experiences and situations will sometimes seem to be reflected in your partner's words or actions, but you need to be able to see past them and see your partner. You know them and you know their intentions for you are love and not harm. If that's true, then reframe what they are saying through that lens. Use "when you say this, I hear this" types of sentences. Repeat what they said, how you heard it, and ask them to explain what they meant. That was a game changer. I tend to be more reactionary than my husband. I've got anxiety and grew up in an emotionally, verbally cruel household. I always make sure to frame what I think I heard or what I assume his motives to be through the lens of, he loves me, so if I'm taking this poorly, then we need to talk about it. This has helped tremendously for both of us. I also picked up a habit early in our marriage where I would write down every thought I had when I was angry at him. I didn't filter it or censor myself. I let myself be angry on paper. Then I read through what I wrote and made bullet points of what was making me angry. After that, I took those notes and thought to myself, did he cause this? Is this actually about him? Is this a trigger that is affecting me because of my past experiences? Based on how I responded to those questions, I knew whether or not my issue was actually with my husband or if it was an internal battle I didn't realize I was having. I'd say 98% of the time was me dealing with my own issues. So yeah, one tip from a therapist and one from myself. We've been married for 15 years and we've never yelled at one another and we don't bicker. This doesn't mean that we don't disagree or that we don't argue, but it's always short-lived and there's never name-calling or any other toxic behavior. We say our piece, try to see the other person's perspective, and then we work out the problem. We are a team. Story 10. My ex has BPD and unfortunately ended up emotionally mistreating me for a couple of years before I finally left a year ago. I'm still picking up the pieces and working through the trauma in therapy. I've struggled with the fact that we were best friends before everything went downhill, and I do feel he truly loved me. Society often sees cruelty as black and white. You should hate them because they chose to mistreat and don't actually love the victim. They just want power. My therapist told me to make space for two things to be true. He mistreated me, and that's unacceptable. And I was right to leave regardless of why he did it, but it's okay to still have compassion and empathy for someone who is suffering. His love for me was real, and I don't have to hate him in order to heal and move on. Story 11. No one in this room can understand this except you. I could finally stop beating my head against the wall trying to explain this to my husband because it was truly impossible for him to understand it. Similarly, I could only explain it to the therapist, but she could only empathize at best. In reverse, it helped me see there are experiences I cannot understand. In that case, I am to close my mouth and listen without thinking I could possibly know what they're going through. Story 12. You miss playing. I'm sorry, what? I was 56 at the time, worried my drinking had gone beyond my control and just being generally unhappy. I was a COO, stupidly compensated, so I sought out a therapist who would help me get my head fully back in the game. After 4 weeks of sessions, I asked her what her assessment was, and that was what she said. I was skeptical to say the least, but then she pointed out that every childhood memory I ever talked about involved playing. Hockey, baseball, hide and seek, it didn't matter. And then she said my memories of high school centered around playing in the band. The concept of playing was long scrubbed by my value system, which revolved around the corporate world, the one I'd worked in for 40 years. She said I like going to bars and drinking is what you do at bars. But I didn't go to bars to drink. I went to bars to have fun and shoot some crack. I'm not Irish, but I love the word. It altered the way I view things and myself, and there's no way in the universe I could have made that connection by myself. Story 13. I talked about feeling like I had to take care of my mom. She was depressed and unmedicated when she was with my dad and would cry in her room a lot. I would go into her room, she cried and hugged her, and we would sit like that until she felt better. It never occurred to me that it wasn't normal. Then my therapist said, that must have been really scary for you. It broke my brain. I went from calm and logical to sobbing in about 2 seconds. Story 14. I was 27 and she interrupted me because I was spiraling really badly. She had to basically hold my hand and remind me that I'm my own person. I can't even remember what I was crying about, but life is really hard for me. I was raised in a mentally and verbally cruel home, and I carried that crap into my late 20s. She said, "Hey, how long have you been feeling like this?" I said, "Since I was like 10, they just treated me like this." She goes, "Your 10-year-old self has been carrying you. She carried you this far. Give her a break. Would you let a 10-year-old or a 27-year-old drive your car?" I said, "Well, obviously 27. She says, "Where would the 10-year-old sit?" I said, "Typically in the back. It's safest." So she goes, "Tell 10-year-old Maya she's okay. She's safe and she can now ride in the back while 27-year-old Maya takes over." She said, "When I get in my head, I should remember, you're not a child, you have more control, and your parents don't exist in your space anymore." I felt silly, but she was right. I was stuck in surviving my parents even years after making my move to get out. I'm 30 now, and I've grown into a really confident young woman. I love my therapist and wish I could have afforded to keep her around. Story 15. Being mistreated as a child had nothing to do with me or something about me. As children, we blame ourselves for being mistreated. We think if we are good enough, smart enough, or whatever enough, then the mistreatment will stop. The adults who mistreated us didn't really do it for something related to us, but for something related to them. It was dependent on their stress, their mood, or their substance abuse. It broke my brain a bit because I had been a perfectionist to my own detriment my entire life. I was constantly focusing on being the best and not making any mistakes. I would see the smallest flaw in everything I did. When I started to let some things go, I realized life had the potential to be a little bit less stressful. When you don't feel like you have to be better than everyone, it allows you to make more connections as well. People are not rivals, they have strengths and weaknesses just like you. Story 16. This will upset a number of people as it did me when I first heard it, but it shifted my perspective. He said, "Depression isn't real." I was livid. I'd just been talking about my struggles with it and how over the years I found no relief from the symptoms. I stopped, glared at him, and then continued in complete ignorance of what he said. He didn't expand on it, and I didn't ask him to. Over the years, though, those three words sat in the back of my mind, popping out every so often along with the feeling of complete contempt I had for him at that moment. However, his meaning started to set in. I was understanding that he wasn't saying it didn't exist. I began to see it as our ability to perceive what is and isn't real is up to us, that while the chemical imbalance is 100% real, the idea that we are broken and untreatable isn't. I sat under my depression umbrella for so long, using it as a crutch for failing whenever I slipped back into it. But I realized that when I move the umbrella and just sit in the rain, it eventually passes. Otherwise, if I stay hiding under it, I never see the rain stop. So for me, those three words had a huge impact on me. It took a long time to understand the context, but when the rain starts, I know it'll stop soon enough. Story 17. She told me that it was natural that I got scared of everything, everyone, anything, and anyone. For context, I had been isolated through my childhood and teen years, so I don't know how to unconsciously walk, see, interact, and reposition my body when going outside and in crowds. I thought I was a monster, thinking I was about to hurt someone if I didn't position my feet in a certain way or stare at them. I was about to give up developing into the functional person I want to be, but she saved the project. She didn't say it directly as advice on something I had told her, so I think she doesn't have any idea that what she said to me saved me. I should tell her. Story 18. I was talking about my chaotic and, in hindsight, obviously badly disordered eating, but I was trying to kind of summarize and shut down the conversation because I was badly in denial about it and wanted to move on to something else. I basically said, yada, 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 this has been a problem since I was a kid. I'm doing this and that to deal with it. I'm managing it myself. It's not a big deal. And she just said, with absolutely no overtones whatsoever apart from empathetic interest, "Oh, and is it working?" And I just sat there with my mouth open for 20 solid seconds because no, it wasn't working. It was not working at all. Nothing I ever did about it ever worked, and I obviously desperately needed help. I'd been living with an eating disorder for 27 years, since I was 8 years old, and those 5 words turned my whole world upside down. It had never occurred to me that maybe I couldn't fix it alone, let alone that maybe it was okay that I couldn't fix it alone. Earth-shattering. Story 19. I've had a couple from my most recent therapist. I've moved a lot as an adult, so I feel like I'm always starting over with new ones, which I think is kind of difficult. My newest one is hard to explain. She's a lot more vocal than my previous ones. She did recently tell me, and this is me paraphrasing because I'm bad at remembering exactly what people say, but it was something like, "That sounds like a Danny problem and not a real problem. If you want to work on your real problems, let's talk about those, but if this is just me listening to one of your emotional circle schmucks, let's stop here." This would only be invalidating if I was coming at her with a serious problem I needed to work through. I waste most of our sessions with me rambling, figuring out what I need to do, actively solving my own issue, and ignoring the important stuff I should be working on, like my body dysmorphia. Story 20. I cut contact with my family because my mom used us to manipulate each other and then used them to hurt me badly. Just as I was getting back in touch and trying to create new dynamics, my brother ended up in her bad books. He was in a bad place and needed support, but she told us all that if we said anything other than what she wanted us to say to him, we were doomed to her. I felt paralyzed by this because no way was I telling him what she wanted me to, but if I said what I wanted to say, then I'd be in direct rebellion of her orders. My therapist pointed out that I left the family because my mom was controlling my relationships with my siblings and I was letting the exact same thing happen again. That my relationship with my siblings was my business and I wasn't the same person as I was 2 years earlier. Needless to say, I reached out to my brother and supported him. Story 21. I struggled with my boyfriends as kids. My kids were in high school, college, and beyond. His were about 10 years younger. I'd been a free mother, so to speak, for a few years. They were cute, with no behavior problems, other than they never came out of their rooms because he let them game 24/7. I kept reminding myself I can't expect them to act like my kids because I didn't raise them. So in therapy one day, when I was expressing my difficulties, wrapping my head around it, my therapist said maybe I would now have a better understanding of how my stepmother was when I went into her family. It definitely was an eye-opener, although we then had to talk about how my stepmother was actually the step monster and I was really good with his kids. Their mom thanked me for being an amazing stepmother. And if any of these stories are getting to you too, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 22. When you worry about something coming up, remember that despite how many ways you fear it can go, it will only ever be one. And how often have previous worries gone exactly as you had prepared for? You've survived everything you've ever worried about before, so maybe you have enough experience to believe you can handle what comes next in the moment without overthinking it beforehand. Besides, think of how much energy you will have saved for dealing with the actual moment by not exhausting yourself beforehand on what-ifs that never come to pass. It really reframed for me what had become a draining habit of planning for every possible scenario. Remember, it's only ever going to be going one way, and chances are it's not even the way you feared it would. And think of how much better equipped you'd feel going into a new situation without exhausting yourself ahead of time. Really reframed it all for me. Suddenly, my brain saw that prep as wildly inefficient, and it clicked for me that, yeah, it makes sense to go into things on a fresh charge and handle whatever it may be at my best. Story 23. My wife and I had some hurdles with a new baby and a ton of bad luck that hit within a year. I do most of the cleaning, housework, and yard work. She insisted she could still handle washing clothes, but it was slipping by almost every week. My therapist asked why that bothered me, and I said I needed socks and garments, which is not something you can really go without. She then said something that we have repeated over the last 13 years. Why not just buy more socks and garments, and then it wouldn't matter if it was late? Crap, that was so easy. So that's what I did. Now, on the very rare occasions we are having an issue, we always ask if we need more socks and garments. Story 24. When I was actively destroying myself with bulimia, she said, I wish you were dumber. That way I'd be able to tell you the consequences of what you're doing to yourself and you'd have a revelation. Unfortunately, you're smart enough and self-aware enough that you know exactly what you're doing, yet you continue in those patterns. I can't say that it completely changed my perspective, but it certainly gave me pause before sticking my head in the toilet bowl. It took many more years and a lot of work, but I'm mostly recovered and doing much better than I was. As with any sort of recovery, it's definitely not linear, and there are some days that I slip up, but I keep getting back on the horse, so that's something. Story 25. You won't ever get over your trauma. Stop setting yourself up for failure with a goal that is impossible to achieve. Your trauma is something that happened to you. It shaped you into who you are now, and it will always be a part of you. What we do now is learn tools to cope with it, live with it, and then move forward. It was like a light bulb went off above my head. I spent most of my life trying to get over it, burying it, or pretending it didn't exist because it was what was expected of me. Being told to stop trying to get over it and learn coping tools to live with it, which is what my therapist gave me, has released something inside me, and I'm no longer looking at myself as a failure for not being able to get over it. I'm finally moving forward instead of being stuck trying to get over it. Story 26. Fear is just a memory. I was attacked by a dog when I was a kid. I was lucky as the handler grabbed it just as it lunged, but I came away with a single cut and a deep fear of dogs. For years, I would literally cross the street to avoid a dog or freeze up when one got near me, no matter the size, no matter the breed, no matter the friendliness of the fluff ball in question. Then the line above was said during a session and it just struck and stuck. I see a dog and my brain automatically replays the fear I had when I was a kid. I'm not scared of the dog in front of me, they're just reminding me of what happened. I'm not, and likely never will be, fully comfortable around barkers or zoomies. I'm definitely not around the breed that attacked me, but I no longer feel the urge to run away when a dog is nearby. Unless it's a friend's dog, but that thing is bigger than a frickin' horse. It's unnatural. Story 27. Actually, my gastroenterologist dropped the bomb. I was on my Mormon mission, absolutely sick from the stress. I was at my assigned gastroenterologist for having lost so much weight and thinking it was something like ulcers or whatever. I was burnt out, but my gas pedal was welded to the floor and I was so focused on doing God's will, it was literally destroying me. What if you just went home? What would happen? He asked. I explained that I couldn't. That shame I would feel both socially and spiritually in my congregation and with God would be too much. The dishonor it would bring would be unfathomable. He warmly explained to me how his son wanted to play football. It was his dream. So one summer, they got all the equipment, paid the entry fees to have him on a league team, and he got all suited up and out on the field, and after his first day said, Dad, I can't do football, I'm sorry. My doctor explained how there was no chastisement, no make it worth my investment. They sold his equipment and never brought it up again. He asked if this could be any different for me. It's such a silly story, but it hit me. I didn't live in a world where the people who cared about me could simply set everything they wanted for me aside. I was so cultishly engaged in it all that I realized over a decade later, after leaving the religion, that most of all, I couldn't do it for myself. I still think of that doctor. I have no idea what his name is, and I'm sure he has no idea I remember him, but no therapy has cracked the walls quite like that one. Story 28. As a therapist myself, it's funny how when I'm struggling, I can say something to a client that I end up thinking about for like an hour afterwards. Most recently, I was telling a client that when you're trying to implement better habits, your goal isn't perfection, but consistency. If you have a goal for a daily habit and you check off every day you do it, if at the end of the month your calendar has checks on most of the days, you've done well. Don't assume a missed day means you failed in your goals. Treat each day as its own separate goal, and the overall long-term goal will form naturally over time. Made me realize how much I was struggling with my own perfectionism, and I could stand to give myself a break on tough days. Story 29. I'd been struggling with finding consistency with exercise and had hit an age where it suddenly was obvious to me how quickly I could lose control, gain weight, and just continue feeling crappy and crappier about myself and my body. I always talked about it as something I should do to be healthier, to be around for longer for my family, to be able to do more for them, and to be able to play with my kids. She reframed it as something I can do for purely selfish reasons. Endorphins make you feel really good. Exercise helps you feel connected to your body, helps you feel strong and powerful, and helps you feel more alive. She basically appealed to my inner addict, which I've long worked to minimize and control, but when it comes to exercise now, I let that thing loose. It's been about 4 years now I've been exercising almost every day, and I feel fantastic. Now, if I don't run or play soccer for more than 2 or 3 days, I feel like crap and my mood darkens. I hit the gym or get on the pitch and I come home feeling fantastic again. Changed my life. Story 30. Not totally a therapist-related story, but in 2012, I had to get a psychological assessment. One part of the assessment was a GAF, Global Assessment of Functioning. It's on a 0 to 100 scale, 100 being you are, quote, totally in tune with reality, and 0 being you are insane. I got a score of 64, not good. I was so ashamed of myself. Now, whenever I want to voice my thoughts to others, I think to myself, are you in touch with reality, buddy, or are you bat crap delusional right now? Either way, I don't speak my opinions much anymore, for the greater good. Story 31. Have you ever considered you might be on the autistic spectrum? No other mental health professional has ever asked me that outright. The consensus has always been personality disorder. I'd been thinking about it a lot, and she can obviously see traits that potentially meet the diagnostic criteria, but she can't actually diagnose me. She's an art therapist. A referral to the Adult Autism Assessment Service has been made, and the MDT multidisciplinary team decided I meet the threshold for assessment, so I'm on the waiting list. Several members of my family have been diagnosed with level 1 autism in the last 2 years. The evidence is mounting that this is the case with me as well. I'm not broken, I just think differently. Story 32. This was maybe 13 years ago when I was really socially anxious and just starting to deal with that and childhood trauma. I was talking about how I hated doing anything new or anything where there were people around because I felt like I was always being analyzed or critiqued. My therapist stopped and said, "What makes you think you are that important?" I was so confused and told him I didn't think I was important at all, and he goes, "Let's use pumping gas as an example. You think when you pull up to a gas station and get out to pump gas, everyone is going to stop what they are doing to critique what you are doing and possibly notice a mistake or error you are making. They're not. Most people don't give a crap who you are or what you are doing and are worried about themselves too much to care about every little thing you are doing." It was a little bit harsh and took a minute for it to register in my brain, but it completely changed my perspective. After that session, I always thought about that anytime I'd get a little bit anxious about a situation. Story 33. This is going to sound absolutely insane and like it's not helpful, but here goes. I had an eating disorder for about 2 years, and I spent most of those 2 years trying to get rid of my eating disorder. I would not wish one of these on anyone. I have been through the gamut of mental health issues, and there was truly nothing that messed with my brain more than an eating disorder. I had crazy, elaborate rules around what I could or couldn't eat that followed neither nutrition nor logic. In the span of a year, I dropped at least 40 pounds. There was one day my wife asked me to pick up cat litter at the store, and when I went to pick up the box, it was too heavy for me to lift. A box of cat litter, something I'd picked up dozens of times without thinking about, I couldn't even lift off the shelf. My therapist recommended I have at least one session with a nutritionist. I fought her on it because I had eating disorder brain, but eventually agreed. I explained to this woman everything I eat and how none of it is healthy, but it's the only stuff I can eat. I don't know how to start eating again because then I'm going to gain weight and keep gaining weight. She says, "I know it feels like it's more, but it's just food. It's not going to destroy you." And there's something about a nutritionist saying it's just food that finally resonated with me. The rules I had made were meaningless and not protecting me from anything. Eating a hamburger wasn't going to hurt me or make anyone hate me. It was just food. It wasn't easy after that, but it was definitely the point where things slowly started to get better. Story 34. My relationship with my mom will never be what I wanted it to be. If I want to have any type of relationship with my mom moving forward, I have to grieve what the relationship is and wasn't, set boundaries, and accept what the relationship can be. My mom and I had a really tumultuous relationship growing up throughout my tween years, teens, and young adulthood. As a 30-year-old, I have the greatest relationship with my mom, and I look forward to being around her and opening up to her. It took a lot of work on both ends, but I'm happy and grateful with what we have now. Story 35. When I was both saying my mom was gaslighting me, but she wasn't that bad, my therapist goes, okay, so she wasn't, so instead she was hallucinating the dish and blaming you for it. So sounds like a serious mental illness she never addressed. Does she still get hallucinations? And I was like, wait, what the heck are you on about? She doesn't get hallucinations. So maybe, just maybe, she was gaslighting you. Touche. ETA, I also had a doctor at an urgent care ask if the staph infection on my lip hurt, and I said, no, it's fine. She goes, you're allowed to say something hurts. Anyway, she was right, and I immediately asked for anything to help. Story 36. 2 things. Look at the evidence. What does the evidence tell you? Basically, rather than letting my mind spiral out with assumptions and worry or hopes and desires, look at what's actually happened. Are my parents ever going to be the nurturing people I need them to be? Well, look at the evidence. It hasn't happened yet, so why bother hoping? Use the evidence to be realistic about how to move forward. You're hard on yourself because you didn't have healthy parents who took care of you properly. You had to be your own parent, and you did a really good job, but you were really hard on yourself as your own parent. While I grew up in a 2-parent household, it was very toxic and my parents were neglectful. He ended up diagnosing me with CPTSD, and we often talked about me as my own parent and how it served me for a long time. I parented myself into a better situation in life, but I continue to be hard on myself, and that style of parenting is no longer serving me. Story 37. Not a therapist, but a mentor. I spent a lot of my life wanting people to feel sorry for me for having a difficult upbringing. I had a lot more horror in my life than most people were used to, and I turned out to be a normal, successful individual. Then I had a mentor that I was explaining my by now well-rehearsed woe is me tale of my childhood to, and he basically said, who freaking cares? Change the record. It stopped me in my tracks, and due to my huge amount of respect for him, I really took it to heart and changed my perspective on a lot of things. While not the most traditional approach, it allowed me to get over a lot of my trauma and work harder on myself to be successful because I can do it myself versus having people pity me and cut me slack. It truly changed my life trajectory. He's still an amazing mentor, and while we don't have the mentor-mentee relationship anymore, I still look up to him as a sort of father figure. Story 38. I was relating to my therapist how upset I was because someone I cared about was being really passive-aggressive towards me, likely as punishment for some perceived slight or offense I had committed. I had absolutely no idea what I might have said or done, though, and I was looking for another way to approach this person and get some answers. He asked me why I was upset and spending my energy just because they were upset. I had no idea. Then he dropped this one on me. If it's not important enough for them to tell you what you may have said or done, then it clearly isn't important. Then we spent some time working on developing skills to not reward schmucks who sabotage relationships because they enjoy being manipulative and passive-aggressive. LOL. Story 39. If you don't like something, just change it. I know how simple that sounds, but truly there were certain things in my life that felt like they were a part of my identity that I truly believed I couldn't change. For example, my name. I hated my name growing up. No one could pronounce it, yet everyone told me how beautiful it was. All 5 of my birth names were my parents' names. I don't have a relationship with either of my parents, none of them my own. I got bullied for having a black girl name when I am very white. Then it dawned on me, if I don't like something, I can change it. So I changed my name. This opened a whole world for me. I wasn't happy in a job I was in, so I got a new one. I wasn't happy in my friendships, so I ended them. I wasn't happy in the body I was in, so I took better care of it. I wasn't happy in the city I was living in, so I moved. I wasn't happy or safe in my relationship with my mom, so I changed that too. It's truly wild how so many of us hold on to certain things and tell ourselves these false narratives. I used to think things weren't as simple for me because they never were simple growing up, but as an adult, I gained clarity and now changing things I am unhappy with isn't unrealistic, it's a habit. Story 40. We often fear that something about us makes us unwanted or unlovable, assuming it's a deal breaker that would make others reject us. We think that if we were in their shoes, we'd reject the flawed person, so we assume others would reject us for it. This leads us to hide all or parts of ourselves, preemptively disqualifying ourselves from any chance of acceptance. But people are different. What you see as a flaw might not matter to someone else, and they could accept you for who you are if given the chance. But by not offering them that chance, you rob yourself of the possibility of connection. If you never take the risk, you guarantee your worst outcome, being alone, which is what you feared you would be if you let yourself be seen in full and got rejected for your assumed deal-breaker flaw. Instead, give others the opportunity to decide for themselves. A chance at rejection is also a chance at acceptance. Put yourself out there, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Story 41. Having gone through a rough breakup with an ex, he and a close friend were constantly playing me, telling me the ex was determined to make our life happy, secure, and trustworthy. Trusting the sincerity of the conversations, I caved and rejoined him. Huge mistake. The trusted friend was one of my ex's mistresses. I was broken. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my home. I didn't trust my job. I was lost. Talking to my therapist, I told her, I'm trying to figure out how to fix myself. Everything around me is tainted, spoiled, broken, and scary. I don't know where to start here. I always stay and fix whatever it is. I don't run from my problems. You can't run away from them. But my mind is screaming at me to run, to start somewhere new. She asked me, "Why can't you run away?" I said something about how one shouldn't run from problems. She asked me again, "Why couldn't I run away? Why? Why did I need to fix myself here? Why?" I couldn't give her an answer. I looked at her, realizing what she was making me see. I can run away. I immediately made plans and started over in a faraway state. Running away can be the best thing you do. Story 42. On the opposite side of the room as a therapist, one thing I've realized, the thing that we say that can be a groundbreaking revelation for our client is often not even a footnote for us. Oftentimes, clients will tell us much later what pivotal statement we made that completely changed their worldview, and we're too caught up in the process and underlying factors. Maybe the person will emote in a way that makes something memorable, but there's no guarantee, a physical or emotional reaction to a comment. But in my personal experience, it's usually the smallest of anecdotes that functionally change someone's life. This thread is a good example of that. Story 43. One session, we were discussing how I can feel selfish even when giving out money to homeless people. It had happened recently, so because I felt like I didn't really do it for a good reason. I just did it because it's the right thing to do, which didn't count to me because goodness should be instinctual, not obligatory. In that same session, I explained how I felt like I was a burden on my friends and how I often felt very alone and sad but wouldn't talk to them about it because it'd be selfish of me to put that on them. And he basically went that I need to reframe things not in terms of selfish and generous, but I should see actions more as assertive. It's not selfish of me to ask my friends for help. It's assertive and that'd be good for me. It's not selfish to give out money just because it's the right thing to do rather than instinctually. It's just assertive and that's good for everyone involved. I'm probably summarizing it wrong, but that really turned my life in a way because it gave me a mental avenue to do things without guilt or worry much easier. Like, I still feel bad if I come to friends with issues, but I'm not as averse to it anymore and don't get a panic attack from it anymore. Story 44. It was a small comment that left an impact on me. We were talking about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. She said something along the lines of how, most likely, you've had the same response your whole life, that each animal has their own way and that it's pretty hard to change that. It really helped me understand things. Looking back, I've always had the same response I do now. It made it a lot easier to understand things from my past and it helped me learn how to take care of myself better. My body is an animal. I, as my consciousness, am not able to control the majority of my bodily functions. She is her own being and it's my job to meet her where she is. And if any of these stories got to you and you liked one of them, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.